Hey guys, Foxdrop here with a video on the elemental dragons, the new dragons that are heading into the Rift, and what they mean for you, a general overview of them, especially from the perspective of the old jingle janglers. Bottom line is that the old dragon has been Foxdropped out of Summoner's Rift and has been replaced by 5 new types of dragon, the 4 elemental dragons and the elder dragon. 4 elemental dragons consist of fire, earth, water, and air. Killing each of these dragons gives you a unique buff depending on what type of element you killed. These buffs will also stack up to 3 times. Fire dragon gives you bonus AD and AP. Earth dragon increases your damage dealt to objectives such as dragon, baron, and even the towers as well. The water dragon increases your health and mana regen, and the air dragon gives you a bonus to your out of combat movement speed. Now, unlike your experience with Professor Oak, you won't be having any control over what element you play with. You're able to see which elemental dragon is coming up next, but you won't have any influence over its spawn. After 35 minutes have passed in the game, no more elemental dragons will spawn, and instead they'll be replaced by the Elder Dragon. Elder Dragon is very similar in power to Baron Nashor, so he's a pretty big deal. And what he does when you kill him is he gives you that 5th dragon buff for 90 seconds. The amount of damage that it does also scales with how many elemental dragon buffs you've taken previously. On top of that, your elemental dragon buffs themselves also become enhanced while you have this buff on. So that's pretty much a good overview of what the dragons do, but what does this mean for the junglers and how is this going to change the way the game is played? Well, specifically, I feel like you'll want to be putting more emphasis on those dragon spawns and taking them down. Specifically because now that the buffs can stack 3 times, it's a really good idea for you to be taking them as often as you can. You'll probably want to put more emphasis on contesting certain dragon elements over the other ones. For example, I don't really feel like the air element is going to be intensely useful in solo queue, the one that gives you move speed out of combat. However, if the red dragon spawns and you really want that extra AD and AP, which I think will be quite powerful in solo queue, it's quite a basic buff, then you might want to put more emphasis on contesting. It also means that you'll probably be seeing more junglers that are either good at taking away things like dragon or that have good impact in the early game, so that you can force yourself to get these dragons by like applying pressure on the lanes, getting ganks and that kind of stuff. And of course, on the same coin, you might be seeing less of champions like the tank junglers who aren't particularly good in the early game and certainly don't take away objectives very well, but tend to scale quite well later on because they're not going to have very good dragon control. Of course, in the late game, with this Elder Dragon now being a pretty viable objectives along the same line as Baron, you might be seeing a lot of trades, like if the enemy team goes to Baron Nashor, you might just want to bum rush the Elder Dragon instead of trying to just contest that Nashor. And you'll also see different priorities being put there depending on what your team wants to do. If your team wants to push and close the game out, then Nashor is much better than the Elder Dragon. However, if your team just wants to fight, especially if they've gotten a lot of those elemental dragon stacks in the past, which then of course increase the potency of the Elder Dragon's buff, then you might want to put your more focus down onto the Elder Dragon. Honestly, for solo queue, I'm not quite sure how it will play out. Now there are more objectives for you to contest, that's more strategy involved, and solo queue never has any strategy. For competitive play, it might be a different story, but for solo queue, I'm not so sure. Also, the fact that you can't choose or have any influence over what elemental dragon will be spawning means it's kind of hard for you to play towards your strengths. If you've got a team that just wants to team fight 24/7, then you're going to want yep, that actually makes sense. It doesn't sound right, but it makes sense. You're going to want a lot of those red dragon buffs. However, if you're a team that maybe just wants to poke or siege or go for objectives, you might want more of that earth dragon buff, which makes you stronger taking down those objectives. Like I say, you can't control those dragon spawns, so it's hard for you to really do that deliberately to kind of play around your team comp's strengths. But anyway, that does it for the video on the brand new dragons we're going to be seeing on Summoner's Rift. Honestly, I like the concept, not a big fan of the RNG aspect of what dragon will be spawning. Would like to see a bit more strategy there involved, but generally speaking, I think they're pretty cool changes. Let me know what you think about these changes down below in the comments. Do you like the new dragon changes? Do you think it's kind of bad? What would you change or maybe tweak a little bit to make it better? I want to hear your thoughts. But if you like this video, guys, feel free to give it a thumbs up. You can subscribe to me for more educational content. You can find me on Facebook, on Twitter, and catch me streaming over at twitch.tv/Foxdrop. Thanks so much for watching this video, guys. Appreciate it. Have a great day, and I will see you in my next video.